What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Mailari. So I'm going to give a quick preview of tonight's Thursday Night Football game between the New York Jets and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jets are the home team tonight. It's a big game for both teams. You have the number one former first overall pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, Trevor Lawrence, taking on the New York Jets, who have the second pick, or had the second pick, I should say, second pick in the draft in 2021, Zach Wilson. He will be starting at quarterback tonight for the Jets. He originally lost his job, missed 3 games in a row after being benched, started last week for the Jets. Didn't have a bad game for the Jets. They ended up losing last week to the Detroit Lions 20-17. The Jets' defense was a disaster in that last minute of the game, giving up a 51-yard touchdown pass from Jared Goff. They ended up taking the lead. The Jets were actually originally up 17-13. Zach Wilson had a 1-yard passing touchdown to C.J. Uzomah, gave the Jets the lead with 4:49 to go, and the Jets end up losing that lead with Jared Goff throwing a 51-yard touchdown pass on 4th down, taking the lead 20-17 in the last couple minutes, and the Jets ended up losing that game. Zach Wilson didn't play bad, though. 18-35 passing, a 51.4% completion percentage with 317 passing yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 pick. Also added in 3 carries to 7 yards on the ground. It wasn't a bad game for Zach Wilson. He did get going with Elijah Moore, 4 catches to 51 yards, and then also Garrett Wilson had a good game as well, 4 catches to 98 yards. And then former BC wide receiver Jeff Smith, who's been in the Jets for some time now, 3 or 4 years, had 4 catches for 77 yards in that game with a long of 50. But he played pretty well in last week's game, Zach Wilson. Tonight's a big game for the Jets, a big game for Jacksonville as well. As for the Jets, if they lose tonight's game, their playoff chances go down to 5%. They have 3 games left of the season. They play Jacksonville tonight, they play Seattle, and play Miami. If you go 3-0, you have a 98% chance getting into the playoffs. If you go 2-1 and lose to the Seahawks, you have a 55% chance to go to the playoffs. 2-1, but you lose tonight at Jacksonville, 46% chance of going to the playoffs. 2-1, but lose to Miami, an 11% chance of going to the playoffs. So if they go 3-0, they have a 98% chance to make the playoffs. That'd obviously be huge. 3 big games left for that Jets team. And obviously, Mike White being down, Zach Wilson has to step up. Wilson has to step up. There's a chance for him to show in his primetime debut that he has what it takes. I know there's a lot of negative attention around Zach Wilson, and I was never the biggest fan of him. I started liking him a little bit more in this offseason. But with everyone drilling him to the ground and hitting him while he's down right now, I'm rooting for Zach Wilson to do well tonight. I hope Wilson has a great game. I really do. As for Jacksonville, if they win their last 3 games, which they play tonight, as I said, versus the Jets, Thursday Night Football, then at the Texans next week, and then their last game of the season is home versus the Titans. If they win all 3 games, they'll win the AFC South and host a playoff game, which would be great. So Jacksonville can control their own destiny if they win tonight and win the other 2 games well if they go 3-0. A big change in this season for that Jaguars team was Trevor Lawrence. In the first 8 games of the season, Jacksonville was 2-6. Trevor Lawrence had 10 touchdowns to 6 picks, an 84.8 passer rating, averaging 230 passing yards per game with a 62.5% completion percentage. You look at Trevor Lawrence's last 6 games, 4-2 record, 70.4% completion percentage compared to a 62.5% completion percentage in his first 8 games, 280 passing yards per game, which is 50 more than he did in the first 8 games, has a 14 touchdown to 1 pick ratio. 14 touchdowns to 1 pick in the last 6 games, which is better than his 10-6 touchdown to interception ratio in the first 8 games. And then also a 111.2 passer rating compared to an 84.8 passer rating in the first 8 games of the season. So Trevor Lawrence has turned things around heavily. He's looking great, playing great football at the right time. If you look at it since week 9 in that 6-game stretch, number 1 completion percentage, 70.4%. Number 1 in the NFL, 14 touchdowns, which is tied for second most in the NFL since week 9, 1 interception, and that 111.2 passer rating is number 1 in the NFL as well. And that's why I said right now, if I'm building a franchise, it's Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow. That's my top 3. That's my tier 1. Tier 2, Josh Allen, probably Justin Herbert right after that. And then, not really too sure what my tier 3 would look like, but Daniel Jones is definitely in that. And probably Tua Tagovailoa as well. That's my building a franchise right now. And maybe Jalen Hurts in there as well. Justin Fields, it'd be in that stretch somewhere. I'd probably have Jalen Hurts tier 2 right now, even though I think that's a little too high. I think he's having a great year, probably an MVP season. But I think if I'm building a franchise, I still think the other guys I'll take over him. So maybe tier 2 would just be Justin Herbert and Josh Allen. And then tier 3 would be Daniel Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, and then Justin Fields. Jared Goff would be in there too, I think. Jared Goff's having a really good year. The Lions 6-1 in their last 7 games. They're 7-7 on the year and have a chance of getting an NFC playoff spot in the wild card. So that'd be pretty interesting. I'm obviously rooting for them to do well. They could make things a lot better in the NFL if there's a lot more competition, and that's what you want to see. You want to see teams that are struggling, like the Jets, like Jacksonville, like Detroit. 3 teams that have had top picks in each of the last 3 drafts have a chance of making it to the playoffs. That obviously shows they are rebuilding the right way, and then also making the NFL playoffs a little bit more interesting. So we're not just seeing the LA Rams and Green Bay and Dallas and Tampa Bay every single year in the playoffs. I like seeing different teams make it that never have a chance. Teams that have been rebuilding and been losing a lot of games over the past few years. The New York Giants, another example. A team that's been losing a lot of games that now has a good chance of making the playoffs. I mean, if they win one more game, they could honestly clinch on Saturday. They need 3 things to happen. But the Giants have a chance of clinching the playoffs on Saturday if they were to beat Minnesota, and they need a couple other things to happen as well. As for the Jets-Jacksonville game tonight, the Jaguars and the Jets, I think it's going to be a really good game. The weather's supposed to be ugly at MetLife Stadium. It's supposed to be rainy and cold, so it could be a tougher game to throw the ball for Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. I root for both guys to do well. I'm more of a Trevor Lawrence fan than I am Zach Wilson. I think I just started rooting for Zach Wilson recently because everyone's kicking him while he's down. That's why I want to see Zach Wilson have a good game. That's why I'm rooting for the Jets to do well in tonight's game. As for prediction, right now, the Jets are favored by 1.5 points. If I was rooting for a team to win, I'm rooting for Jacksonville to win, but I want Zach Wilson to have a good game. I want Zach Wilson to have a good enough game tonight where it's not his fault for why the Jets lost. I want him to have a good game, throw 2 or 3 touchdown passes, look good, have a good game, but I want Trevor Lawrence and Jacksonville to win so that if they win the next 2 games after this, they have a chance of making the playoffs, or they will make the playoffs and win their last 3 games, which Tennessee was the divisional leader. Still right now, hold the number 1 spot in that division, the AFC South. But with Ryan Tannehill going down potentially for the season, that opens the door for Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars to make a run and make the playoffs. So I'm rooting for Jacksonville to win tonight, but I want Zach Wilson to throw 2 or 3 touchdown passes in his primetime debut. I'm going to go with this as my prediction. I'm going to go with the Jets losing tonight's game very close, 27-24, Jacksonville with the win. That's my prediction. The Jets really need tonight's win, though. They've lost 3 in a row. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. They currently are out of the playoff picture in the AFC. As for Jacksonville, they've won 2 out of their last 3 games, coming off 2 wins in a row. 2 big wins, one of them being last week against the Dallas Cowboys. Trevor Lawrence was electric in that game. 27-42 passing, 318 yards, 4 touchdowns and 1 pick with a 109 passer rating. Also added 3 carries of 21 yards on the ground. Evan Engram's been looking like one of the best tight ends in the league over the last few weeks. 8 catches of 62 yards in last week's game. And Zay Jones and Trevor Lawrence had a Joe Montana and Jerry Rice connection last week. Zay Jones had 6 catches, 109 yards, and 3 touchdowns with a 59-yard reception in last week's game for a long. So obviously, the Jets, Jaguars both need this game. I'm going to give the Jaguars the edge in this game. I do like what I'm seeing out of Trevor Lawrence. He's got Jacksonville winning 2 in a row. They beat the Titans a few weeks ago, 36-22. Then just beat Dallas this past week in an overtime win. Outscoring Dallas after halftime, outscoring Dallas 33-13. After halftime, Jacksonville outscored the Dallas Cowboys 33-13. And no one's talking about that. I mean, Jacksonville lit up that Cowboys defense. Lit them up. 503 yards to Dallas' 397. 318 passing yards from Trevor Lawrence to Dak's 256. If you look at what they did overall as well in the red zone, they're both 3 or 4 in the red zone, so both offenses were pretty efficient there. Goal to go, Jacksonville scored 3 out of 3 times when they were goal to go in between the 10-yard line and the end zone. So pretty impressive. They could score every single time they got there, and that's why I think they could score tonight, even though it's going to rain. Might be tough to throw the ball. Trevor Lawrence has a great arm. One thing about Zach Wilson, he has a great arm. The mechanics are great. He has a great arm. Likes throwing sidearm for some reason, forcing balls into tight windows. And that's the one thing with Zach Wilson right now, besides maybe his leadership he might lack, and maybe obviously has to buy the locker room back, maybe making a big play, getting a big win. The one thing with him is decision-making, and that's why I'm rooting for him to do well, since I think everyone's just ripping him apart. But Wilson's only a second-year quarterback, was the second pick in the draft a year and a half ago now. And I think it's really hard to give up on a guy that was a second pick overall in the draft. And that's why I think the Jets, still, even though they benched him at one point, maybe there was just a wake-up call, and Mike White obviously now being hurt, he's now got the chance to step back in and win back the role of being the starting quarterback. Gets a big win tonight, who knows? Even if Mike White's healthy, I think Zach Wilson could still start over him at this point. Even though a few weeks ago I was saying I think Zach Wilson's done with the Jets, Now I'm rooting for him to do well, as I said, because everyone's bashing him and hitting him when he's down and hitting him to the ground. That's why I want to see Zach Wilson do well tonight and get a win. But as I said, I will be rooting for the Jets and Jaguars to win this game, but I'm rooting for Zach Wilson to do well at the same time as well. Since I love Trevor Lawrence, I'm a big Trevor Lawrence fan, but I'm rooting for Zach Wilson to make some big plays in prime time. Hopefully throws 2 or 3 touchdowns and 250 yards and maybe silences the critics a little bit with a good performance in prime time under the lights. And one last thing I wanted to mention before I close the episode, the Jaguars have won 3 out of the last 4 games, beating the Cowboys, the Titans, and the Ravens in that stretch, losing only to the Lions 40-14. That was a tough game on December 4th in Week 13. But if you look at their schedule this season, they've lost every game by 1 possession besides the 10-point loss to the Chiefs in Week 10 at Kansas City, which is a tough game. 27-17, they lost that game. And then 40-14, they lost Week 13 at Detroit. So that means 2 losses out of their 8. They're 6-8 on the year. 2 of their 8 losses have been by more than 1 possession. So 6 out of 8 of their losses have been by 1 possession, 8 points or less. So it shows them in every single game this year, and obviously shows the progression of this team, obviously in their rebuild. You draft Trevor Lawrence with the first overall pick in 2021. You get Doug Peterson as his head coach going into a second year, a very good offensive-minded head coach, and then build around him, getting him guys like Zay Jones, like Christian Kirk, getting Travis Etienne healthy, and then also getting Evan Ingram as well. This offense was ready to roll this year, and I'm happy to see Trevor Lawrence doing well in Jacksonville, turning around their rebuild and starting to win some big games. A 6-8 on the year. They win their last 3 games of the year, including tonight and 2 more. They will make the playoffs and win the AFC South, which is great, showing that their rebuild has gone well, and I'm rooting for Trevor Lawrence to do well. Anyways, that does conclude today's episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it and hope you guys have a good one. Thank you.